Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We, if you can believe it, are at 2 a.m. Ryan Moen, the co-director of the Victoria Tea Festival Revival, is joining me this entire time he's been on. And we have one of our volunteers, Mike. Big shout out to him. I don't know if you have any 24-hour volunteers over in Pod B there. I think we lost the puppy there. He's gone to sleep on you. But that's okay. You know, it's 2 a.m. PST. That's all good. But we've had some pretty exciting dialogue. So we just had the Doak Estate on live from India. We have had some sessions live from Japan, live from China, live from Vancouver, live from Victoria. It's a very local, very global experience that we've had so far. I'm really happy to have a good friend of mine on the show today, joining us from Quebec. It's 5 a.m. in Quebec. Charles of Le Simplon. Can you pronounce this for me? Maybe Ryan's going to do a better job.
Les samples.
Le Simplon.
Yes.
Okay. This is it. This is an okay pronunciation. Le Simplon.
Oui, c'est bien.
Okay, thank you. You're very kind. Charles, you wanna tell our viewers a little bit about what it is that you do and maybe introduce yourself to them?
Yeah, totally. So, Les Simples is a herbal tea production farm.
Mm-hmm.
So we produce herbal teas. We grow them or harvest them either in our garden or in the wild, and we dry them and we distribute them in our community. So that's the main part of what we do with Les Simples, with the garden that we tend, and the fact that we are constantly outside gardening, either gardening or harvesting. We also grow a big part of our food, vegetables. So it's a business for tea, herbal tea selling, but also it provides us for direct sustenance for our food.
Okay. Yeah, very cool. Yeah, and I've as long as I've known you, you've been really fascinated by the medicinal impacts that herbs, Camellia sinensis being one of them, have on our system, but also on our spirit, on our psyche. And it seems to be that you've always been, as long as I've known you anyways, you've told me some stories of your transition to be thinking of herbs this way, but just how the carefulness in production, the carefulness in the harvest, that mindfulness seems to translate into greater not only flavor complexity but medicinal integrity. And I think that's an area where we really jive, like we really agree on this. And you've taken this care, this conversation that we have, like we've been having a lot of really amazing tea farmers on the show, but you take this perspective of care in harvest to herbal teas or to these tisanes, and you wanted to do a talk today, it sounds like, on how plants change us, and how we can gain significance through our relationship with plants. Maybe you wanted to talk on that a bit, man, if you would be so kind.
Yeah, but you're talking about our our own relationship. Jared and I, um, since we know each other. I think in 2009 we met in a tea festival in Victoria for
Mm-hmm.
the first time with me, you, and you made us drink with my friend Renaud at the time the great matchas. We were so impressed, uh,
Nice to hear.
so delighted. It was amazing. This this meeting with you, but at that I wasn't farming, so you see how things have changed in such a small amount of time for me as a herbal tea farmer. Like it's something that I do since not such a long time, and I was just watching the people from the Doak Estate, and I didn't get catch how long they've been doing it, but it seems to me that it's a long time that they've been cultivating and having the garden. Do you know that? Could you remind me how long they have been gardening tea
As far
themselves?
as far as I
Since
know,
1998.
yes, thank you. Yeah, so quite a long time.
Yeah, so 1998. Yeah, well,
So
oh
20,
yeah,
22 years.
So I'm, I was just going to introduce the fact that my life at the point I was traveling and playing music and staying a few months in Victoria at the time when we met, and now I'm grounded in this lifestyle where I have this garden that I tend and all the plants that we need to take care of during the summertime, but also that we think about during winter time because they're perennials, and we always worry that at this time of at this time of the year now the snow has fallen, but that's great. Yesterday the ground was still you could see the dirt and the soil and everything in the leaves, but now it's covered with snow, and that's quite reassuring because tomorrow night will be minus 10 degrees Celsius, and that's really hard for the plants in the fall. So we think about them even when we're not gardening, and even when we don't see them, we're thinking, oh, we hope that they won't die in the fall when there is a really strong frost. And that has been a big part of my life to think about the plant. So that's a big part of the relationship that I maintain, and I say we because I do this and I live with my lover Cynthia,
Mm.
and we both are really implicating ourselves in relationship with the plants.
Hmm. And to give honor to Cynthia too, like she's the one who started this herbal preparation. Like you have always been fascinated and interested, but in terms of the growing and producing them into herbs and then having them at the local farmers market, etc. It was the origin is of, I guess, of Le Simple is with her, correct? And then you've joined forces with your perspective and then shared this journey, um,
Yeah.
which is pretty rad. And I remember viewing your drawing facility. Like I really connected with your space when we were able to visit you in Quebec, you and I, and it was just so amazing to see the different fermentations that you do, the different projects and experiments that you do. But it's also just so amazing. You had this very uh, how do I explain it? Like the drying facility that you have, like it's small and it works, and you're able to produce some. I mean, I've had some of your herbs sent my way, and they're just so beautiful, really really amazing. They didn't make it in time for the show today, unfortunately, which is too bad. I know that I had a chance to taste them before. Canada Post has kind of let us down with a number of people that are on the show today, but some of them they made it in time. So thank you to Canada Post, and darn you Canada Post at the same time. So. But
As long as you get to enjoy them whenever they arrive, it's okay.
mhm.
So yeah, I wanted to continue with the theme of what I was thinking to introduce with my appearance on the show.
Mhm.
Um, I just wanted to put things in perspective because for many people that comes from an agricultural background, it seems more natural that and more meaningful that they keep growing vegetables, they keep but nowadays, coming from the suburb and having free, free choice in my life
Mhm.
for whatever I can do with my life, and I'm choosing to be a gardener and a herbal tea producer, um, and that's what I was wanting to introduce with my presence on the festival is that um, it was for me about choosing a way of life that will improve the world, thinking that things are not going very well in many places in the world. Many people are moving around in really precarious conditions, from war and from climate change, and
Mhm.
then acting uh, on that for me was to ground myself in a lifestyle that will be lowering my needs and connected more to my directly to my food, my needs,
Mhm.
food, drinks, and pottery, for the dishes in the house. So So yeah, and then plants, the role that it takes in this transition, I would say, for from not knowing what I want to do in my life and having all the choice that I want. I could have done whatever I wanted. That's the chance that that I have in my life. I could have gone to school, study whatever I wanted, and then I decided to do this to lower my needs and live close from the plants. And then the plants, when I begin to think a lot about them and make sure that they're growing well, so growing really good herbal teas, so and my really good vegetables, succeeding in our short time season in Quebec. We have that's the particularity of our gardening experience here is that the season is really short. It starts mid-May. That's when we can sometimes get into the garden when it's not too wet,
Mm-hmm.
and then it finishes mid-September, end of September, maybe mid-October if we're lucky. So it's a really short time, and then we have to really be focused on making sure that things grow well, and then we also try to grow things that are, we say. Um, we could not grow tea plants here, like Camellia sinensis, because the season is too short. But
Mm-hmm.
we can't grow rice, but we have to focus on really short season rice. So that's an example of the thing that we experiment with, and then that keep us acting every day, thinking of the rice. Oh, maybe it would be benefiting if I put a tarp on the rice so that it gets more heat units
Right.
during the season, and then we can go through before the frost. Rice thinks it's freezing when it's 10 degrees Celsius. So then in August, when rice begins to think, oh, it's gonna be winter soon, but in August it's just beginning to flower. So we're quite worried at that moment that we want the rice to think that the season is still going.
Right.
That makes us active, and that gives us meaning in our life because it keeps us busy,
Mm-hmm.
keeps us really active. So that's the I wanted to put that in perspective with the world situation, and then as an individual that comes from this society where we have a free choice of doing whatever we want. Then what is meaningful? In, I find myself surrounded with people that are looking in losing meaning in life.
Mm.
So that's how I have found for myself that plants bring significance in. And I like to think it like this. We say that we are slaves to the plant. And yesterday, when the snow falls like this on the ground, it like I have this extra garlic just in front of me on the ground that I could have planted, but now the snow have fallen. But and I'm free now of this garlic task. It's too bad that I didn't plant this. I already planted most of our garlic. That was an extra,
Mm-hmm.
but the snow has fallen, and then wow, okay, I'm relieved. So we laugh about this. We are slaves to the plants, or the plants. They know that they can use me. They can use the people that garden. They can use the people that like plants to propagate, to enhance their importance in the human world as well as their own survival.
Hmm. No, that.
Charles, I wonder,
Oh, go.
as somebody who's, oh, I got a little bit of echo there, but as somebody you said that's traveled around quite a bit, I know it takes a long time to get a garden, like to to set the soil and then start to know where the sun is gonna to do best for which kind of crops. It takes a lot of energy. Like it's definitely rewarding, but it takes time for that kind of reward. And I was wondering, like, what was the first crop that, as a tisane or like an herbal tea producer, that you remember tasting after you put in all that effort?
That's a good question. I would think, well, my, in my first garden that here in Kamouraska, because before that I would have harvested a lot of plants when I was traveling, so mostly wild or in other people's garden. But in my own garden, I would think about holy basil as a, and it's still very present in my life. This plant is a really strong aromatic plant, and it was for me a new taste, a new range of taste. So the holy basil tulsi as this um, half would be basil, like I would have known in the kitchen, and the other half would be more like the clove taste, rosemary taste. So, and then this mix in a really strong scented mix of aroma, and then gardening with it. So just passing by and touching it, that's the memory that I have. And my first good encounter with the plants in the garden would be holy basil.
That's really interesting. Actually, you were also. I mean, I maybe you had more you wanted to say on that, Ryan, before I asked to.
Yeah, I guess I want to jump back in. Is you were talking about when the snow falls, and that that's when that's when the garden sleeps, but it's also when that's when gardens sleep on the west coast because we live in the rainforest. But you deal with like freezing cold snow. Like, have you ever had to mourn the loss of any of your plants?
Yeah, often like, remember the first year we had Anise Hyssop. So Anise Hyssop is perennial, but it's in our climate. We are in zone 4, and Anise Hyssop would be zone 5. So just a slightly warmer climate zone, and then so some winter it dies, some winter it survives. And we have the habits now of starting it over every year. We start new plants in case that they didn't thrive and they didn't survive through the cold. So it depends on the how strong will be, especially the first frost in the when there is not a good snow cover, because the snow when it's there it makes an insulation from the air soil, so it keeps the soil not too cold. So when there is the snow like we had yesterday, it's amazing. We have so it has been a little cold, but not too much. Now we have about 20 centimeter of snow, so that makes an insulation. So the Anise Hyssop now will be protected from the minus 15 probably that will happen tonight or tomorrow night, and then it happens often that we arrive in the next year. It's spring, the whole bed would have died.
Okay.
So because of the really bad winter condition, especially in the fall. Like yeah, last year we had rain and then really good strong cold, and that kills the plants at the crown. It freezes the plants. And many plants survive. It's amazing because we have this Hyssop that would die. We would have the lemon balm. We have the mint. We have all these plants that survive very well, no problem. We have never any worries about them in the cold. So it's amazing how different plants, all the needs of the plants are different from each other.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, there must be such a definitely like an interaction with like I remember talking about this with you when we had you on the show. Was just this idea of working with perennials and focusing on that relationship with perennials. So they don't stick around, but some of the plants that you work with, it sounds like they do, and it's interesting to also hear kind of this this parallel with you're talking about sort of working with rice and trying to find a moment where you can give the rice an opportunity to grow in such an inhospitable area for rice, right? And you're just kind of giving it a little bit more room by maybe planting a little bit earlier or planting it in like a warmer environment and then bringing it outside, etc. It's interesting because we just had Takaki on from Japan, and he was talking about like how he's year after year he's trying different experiments to make things work, and one of the things that he's trying to achieve is to be able to have the plants ready at the right moment, so that they can produce really good flavors. That must be an interesting project for you too, right? It's like you're learning the plants year after year and figuring out, what makes them, not only what makes them develop in a way that they're not going to die, they're going to be ready at a good moment for harvest, but also sort of like, I guess, making those micro adjustments as the weather patterns change, and it just, I find this whole process so fascinating. Like, not only growing food for consumption, but this whole idea of growing medicine, and these changes that you can do in production to bring about different flavors and different potencies, right? You introduced to me this really lovely herb that I'd never had before. It was like, I think it's called Great Hyssop, or it's like an Anise Hyssop, and
Yeah.
what a lovely plant. That is one of. You also do like an ashwagandha. What is it that? How do you decide what plants you're going to focus on and bring maybe like grow more of, so that you can make them a part of what you do as a company as well?
Mhm. It's very intuitive, but it's mostly taste and it's our appetite for it.
For
So
sure.
taste, yeah, and then many plants we've known through seeds companies. So when we order seeds, we go through the seeds catalog. So and then there is a really good herbal medicinal plant seed producer in Oregon called Strictly Medicinals,
Okay.
and they have many hundred, maybe 200, 300 different medicinal plants. Amazing seed source, very dedicated to high quality and variety, genetical variety of medicinal plants. And then we find these plants that we've never known, we didn't know about, and then we read about their properties and if we could grow them, and then we try them. So that's how we come to encounter many of the plants that we grow. Otherwise,
Hmm.
it will be the taste. So we have this. Actually, it's a basil that we got from Strictly Medicinal, the seeds from them,
Mm-hmm.
and it comes from. They harvested them. They harvested the seeds in Zanzibar, in Tanzania, and it's a basil that tastes lime. So it will be similar to a
That's cool.
regular basil, lime basil, but this one we grow for herbal tea, not for cooking, and it's just really delicious in tea. And we've been selling seeds and growing it as much as we can. But it comes from Zanzibar, and that's another of these plants that likes the warmth. So what happens with basil? It's in our short season is that it just produces less, and we definitely have to adjust and time our seedlings in the spring when we start them indoor, so that they are at the prime size. They don't get the root don't get too big in the cells in which we grow them inside. So at the point where it's warm enough outside, we get the Kivum bacillin, that's the name of the basil,
Mm-hmm.
and get it outside. I think when it gets 18 degrees and more in average during the day. So then for it to get maturity as fast as we can. So and then we start as soon as it starts to flowers, the first flower heads that comes out. Then that's when we begin to harvest, and we do seeding harvest. So we harvest every week the same plants, but we just harvest the flower heads,
Mm-hmm.
and then from the year this grows into a bigger plant, and then get more flowers as the season goes on every week.
Interesting. Okay, very cool. Um, the this whole idea of just harvesting that just the flower heads, is this a concept that you borrowed from tea, which is to like just concentrate on certain particularly flavorful components of the plant, or what is it that made you make that decision? And I imagine you would also harvest other parts of the plant, or is it just the flowers that you harvest? And is this, since it's a
Depend. It really depends on the plants that we grow, but mostly the flowers will be what brings more the aromatic sides of a
right?
plant.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's a prime time for aromatic taste. So the notes of the taste will be more aromatic when it's flowers, and then when if you let them grow, then they will concentrate more into the oil, which is some of the that aromatic too, but let's see. Not the oils. It would be more the vegetable, the vegetal side, like the chlorophyll
Right,
taste
right.
come out when you let them go or before they flower, and then you get a more straw-like taste, like a drier straw taste, woody when you let them even get brownish.
Mm.
Uh, they go to seed production when if ever they flower, it's because they will be producing seeds, and then that will be more woody kind of characteristic and thus. We have one. We sell our plants to different people. So people come and ask for herbal tea to drink in the kitchen. But there is brewers that ask us quantities of plants for their recipes, the beer recipes. And one brewer in the community always buys us a quantity of hyssop, and he asks us that it gets brownish that before we harvest. So he doesn't want the the flower heads. He wants more the the brownish kind of hyssop, and
Yeah.
it reminds me of the curing that marijuana growers do with
Right.
their plants. They will let the plants mature completely before they harvest, so they develop a different taste. And hyssop uh, seemingly has the same kind of the same notes, a skunky kind of taste, which is similar to what we can find in some hops. And then the
Interesting.
brewer found that it's better when we let the the plant we harvest it more at the end of the season. So it depends on which plant
Wow.
that we.
Now,
So
hops are really bitter, and anise hyssop in my head is like licorice sweet. What characteristic is it about anise hyssop, or is this a different hyssop? Is this the other hyssop that you're talking about?
yeah, it's a different hyssop.
Okay, so the one they're unrelated, right? Like anise hyssop almost it's like a relative of the mint family, if I understand, and then hyssop is a complete it's a
Right?
completely different plant, and that one is a
They're
little bit more bitter, correct? And that's what you're referring to.
Um, yeah, well, they're both labia. So
Mm-hmm.
labia and family. Anis hyssop, another common name, the way we call it in French, but also sometimes in English, the agastache.
Yeah,
So that takes away the confusion between the two plants.
totally.
But
I like calling it agastache. I think it's great, great way to differentiate. Yeah,
the, and hyssop is bitter, but not too bitter. It's really aromatic. It's a
interesting.
bit it's skunky taste, like um, lavender and rosemary, thyme, kind of really strong, very strong essential oil um, smell. Also mint. There is definitely mint touch to it. This a very very strong taste, but not too bitter.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's the skunky side that will come to be similar to remind us what hops would be.
The hops is quite floral too. It's interesting this idea of curing it on while it's growing too, because I am really interested in wildcrafting, and one thing that comes up a lot is wild blackberry, and a number of First Nations communities talk about letting the blackberry leaves brown a bit before you harvest them, and they're going to have a way better concentration of flavor than if you harvest them when they're young, which is goes against sort of the preconceived notions we would have, especially when we're dealing with Camellia sinensis, because we
Right.
talk about always harvesting the young leaves, that that's where all the flavor concentration is. It's really an interesting idea that we would we would adjust when we harvest to produce different flavor compounds. But it totally makes sense, especially if you're not gonna get a super tannic or like a really unpleasant result. You're just gonna have like a concentration of interesting or preferred flavors. That's
Right.
that's really fascinating, huh? We had a fellow on earlier in the broadcast, John Patterson. He was talking to us about his work with Tissons. I think I mentioned him to you before. Requiem Naturals. He's done some experiments where he's taken this idea of enzymatic oxidation that's been applied to tea, and he's purposefully taken fireweed and he's bruised it, and he's kind of like massaged it and worked with it and tried to bring out different flavor compounds similar to tea, and then like hitting it, like he'll steam it, or and then he'll to do the kill green process. And like it's quite fascinating what he's done, where he's taken these production styles. It'd be really interesting to see on your farm, Charles, that kind of thing. Hey, like what would be possible with holy basil if you were to kind of like take oolong style and maybe like harvest, but like bruise it a bit and bring out sort of like see if it browns. I don't know if it's possible. Like there might be an herb that it's possible with and herbs that it's not possible with, but unleashing and experimenting with enzymatic oxidation would be really, really fascinating, because it seems yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just thinking that we've been experimenting too with milkweed.
Okay.
Milk, not milkweed. The same plant that we say fireweed oxidation.
Okay.
What I've found, probably it's quite obvious, is that it's you need a certain the best plants that turns out great with oxidation have a certain quantity of astringency, so that the astringency will transform through oxidation and will develop better taste. And it's interesting how that happens with wine. So the good some of the good wines, from my experience, but from what I've heard, so you need a good strong astringency at the beginning before you begin to age it.
Yeah, good cider apples, same thing, right? You need a really, like, cider apples that are meant for cider are really terrible to eat, but some of the really delicious tasting apples are terrible for cider, because you need that presence of malic acid and tannic acid, and you need to develop that via fermentation into something really interesting. So it makes sense with these enzymatic oxidations to have something like Camellia sinensis that has a high tannin, and then developing that through that withering process. It's really fascinating talking to you though about those harvesting times. That's a really interesting piece of information, just like how you can cure on the plant. I'd never actually really heard of that before. That's really interesting. But to combine those two together, hey, like choose those harvest times, and then perhaps bring about some manipulation post harvest that's going to bring about some really interesting flavors and medicinal opportunities.
Yeah. And talking about harvesting time, we have these plants. So I'll come back to holy basil that we harvest every week. But we always harvest the flower heads as soon as they begin to flower at the end of June. But then the quality of the flower heads change throughout the season, just of the different environmental factors, and also the rooting that has got deeper, and also with sometimes with dryness, we get all these dry spells during the summer, and then that changes the quality. And we like to observe this throughout the season. So the same flower heads that we harvest will have different notes and tastes. We end up quite mixing our batch. Though we keep them in big bags, this size approximately. But and that's maybe 3 weeks of harvest in one bag.
Oh, wow.
But still can retrace throughout the season within the numbers that we keep track on our harvest. Oh, this is interesting. At the end of the season, it has developed more deeper bitterness, or lot more aromatic in the spring. So and that parallels a lot what I've experimented with tasting tea
Mm-hmm.
before I began to garden, because I was more tea had always been a interesting a plant in my life, and it's it's different scale of the taste. I've been teaching me a lot about plants.
Interesting. Huh. Hmm. Yeah, no, that's really really fascinating. Um, sorry, what was that?
No,
I thought I overheard you saying so. So so your concept, this learning that you get from plants that help develop you as a person as well, I think is something that you wanted to talk on, and it's interesting to hear this conversation about the different um, ways that you've learned and understood the plants as you grow. It's I know that when I first met you, Charles, like you said in your introduction here, that you were quite the wanderer, and you still are. You still explore the world. You still, when it's not a pandemic, you're still doing your travels. But you are very rooted as well, and to be able to have that time with the same land. Like, I don't know about you, but for me growing up, I had a lot of different houses, lived in many different cities, and so I didn't have this chance to really connect with a particular space. And I still remember it very clearly when I first moved to Vancouver Island. I'd always had my father grew up here. My mom even grew up in Vancouver Island, but like I'd never really lived here long term. There was 3 years when I was really young. But it was really interesting to be in the same house for 2 winters in a row. And I don't really have a strong memory of that. And then to have like a third and a fourth and a fifth winter, and just there was like a nearby area, like a wild area near where I was living for the first while here. And I just remember seeing the trees get taller and seeing the landscape sort of gradually morph and change, and to get really connected, and to see patterns that would develop over time. And it was just such a fascinating and beautiful experience. And it must be like to have that land that you're cultivating and interacting with. There was a person speaking today about how she doesn't work with farmers that are overly manipulative of the land spaces that they're working in. She really wants to work with tea farmers that are mostly off grid, that are self sufficient with their food growing, because she feels then they don't have to be as responsive to, I guess, government needs and requirements. This is a conversation that was happening in China.
yeah,
But it's such an interesting idea that I think the summary of that conversation was that she really likes to work with farmers where the tea is growing them, right? You must feel sometimes like your herbs and your plants that you're growing, that they are growing you as a person, hey?
yeah, totally, totally. Yeah. It's being really busy with the plants, really busy with the tea, and that definitely you feel that it's something that happens in between the humans and the plants,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a long time relationship that is revived.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Go ahead, Ryan. You look like you're about to say something. No, okay. Yeah, I was just gonna say we have about 5 minutes left with you, Charles. Um,
Yeah,
I don't know if there's a little bit more like pieces to this conversation that you wanted to bring up at the end of our conversation here. I don't want to rush you in any way, shape, or form, but I like to remind people when we're at that 5 minute mark, so that I don't stop you from finishing your thoughts or some piece that you want to communicate to everybody who's watching.
yeah, totally. But well, I think there is also as I get into deeper into the seasons that succeed, it goes one after the other throughout the years. So the season come back. Okay, fall again. It's been 5, 6, 7 years that we go through these same tasks at the fall.
Mm-hmm.
We adjust every year to get them more efficient, and also we, uh, we we take this task as meditative activity that keeps us sane and balanced. Um, but I've found that also we the plants, medicinal plants that we grow, we grow them for the medicinal properties, and of course there is all the chemistry in the plants. And there is a famous herbalist called Pelican. He was writing about how alkaloids in plants, the way he would interpret the actions of alkaloids as a general chemical family in plants,
Mm-hmm.
is that, and I think it's interesting because caffeine is an alkaloid that we find in yes, this,
Mm-hmm.
but he was saying that alkaloids take possessions of human, so they possess human beings. So when you take alkaloids in, the alkaloids possess the human spirit, the human body, and it controls it in such in a way. So
Interesting.
that's interesting how you could think of plant will that act upon the human being. So when you say that plants are growing meat, they're growing people as they consume them. So that's a concept that I like to think about when I think of my relationship and how it changed me with
That's
the
really
plant.
interesting. Their will is exercised upon you. That's a fascinating thought to finish up here with. Uh, I'm really learning a lot from these sessions, 1,000%. Um, Ryan, did you want to speak some thoughts here at the end? Maybe if you wanted some final thoughts as we wrap up this particular session.
Yeah, I think it's the nicest part was just remembering that like there is space for grounding, and it's grounding when you see the first snowfall and having plants around us. You know, I first went to, oh, how is your garden affecting you? But you quickly reminded me that plants have always been around you, and you could wild harvest. Of course, huge ethics around that and figuring out how to do that appropriately, but that plants remind us of the weather, that reminds us that, you know, it's each day is important, and yeah, that you get to bring that into a harvest that brings it into a cup. I think that's magic. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, we really appreciate you coming on the show today, Charles. Really informative as always. I find that the dialogues with you are always very meaningful and very fascinating. So I appreciate what you bring to the world and what you allow the world to exercise through you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm a bit teared because I find that yes, we speak and we exchange with words, but I miss your presence and being able to exchange also when we get to drink tea together.
I miss it as well, man. You've come up a number of times in conversation already in the show, and the perspectives that you bring to tea are an inspiration. So, um, thank you, and I'd also look forward to when the coronavirus's effects have subsided and we're able to interact in person again. It will be a good day, and we will drink tea, and it will be good. We will let the alkaloids possess us. We will be tea drunk a little bit, and it will be good times, my friend.
Yeah,
Okay,
right
awesome.
on.
Thank you for coming on. We'll catch you. I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, you.
Goodbye, Charles.
Bye.
Okay. So that was Charles Antoine Frendelin joining us live from Quebec in a very small village north of Quebec City with his lovely work that he's doing with herbal tea farming. It's always a genuinely interesting perspective that he brings to the table. So huge appreciation there. And I will let Ryan. You want to take over for introducing the next
All
one?
right. For next one, in 14 minutes and 30 seconds, we're going to be talking again with Mimi. Well, Mimi's going to bring Mimi Chu from representing the Guizhou region of China. But I believe she's broadcasting out of Yunnan, and she'll be providing us with a Chinese tea ceremony. So if you stay tuned for about 3 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and again, that's just under 15 minutes, we promise we'll come back. And I know that those connections can be a little bit rough, but if you can hold on and bear with us, we're going to try and make it as pleasurable as possible. And I guarantee it's going to be the best 3 a.m. Tea ceremony you'll see tonight. Thank you. We'll see you.